purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. I'm Fahringer, the producer and host of this show. And I have with me today some people from the ACLU. We have to rattle around here and make noises occasionally because people will forget that the ACLU exists, so we like to keep them up here. And I managed to snag 3 at one time. That is no mean trick, let me tell you. Because I got Michael White, attorney. I got Joyce Hanson, who is the regional director, didn't you say? And I have my precious darling Dan Burgess, who is a volunteer. So welcome all of you to Freethought Forum. Thank you for coming. And as I say, you've got to make noises sometimes because people, I heard that somebody say one time that finding somebody from the ACLU was like nailing Jell-O to the wall. So, see, you need to be a little more. Jerry Goldstein used to keep things stirred up a little bit, but he doesn't do it anymore, does he, with the ACLU?
Well, he works, I think, more on the national level, so you don't see him that much locally.
Yeah, once in a while if we have something. Nobody commented, much to my chagrin, on the case we had here in town with the parking lot exemption for the First Baptist Church. And this parking lot, I will tell the people if anyone's watching, that it is the property of the First Baptist Church, and it is leased out to a business during the week because, of course, they don't have church 7 days a week. And I firmly believe they should be paying tax on that property. And it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and they said it could stand that this thing was tax exempt. I mean, they just didn't touch it. But I think, don't you think it's going to get there eventually? Because this will have every church in the country standing in line for more tax exemptions.
Well, I haven't seen that Supreme Court decision yet, but I think it's, from just reading the reports about it, it seems that a lot of the fact issues will determine whether or not, the historical development of those fact questions, the historical development of how they acquired the lot and what they used it for and whether it was really purchased for a church purpose and all of that. And I think that lot goes back a long way before Valero Energy Corporation ever wanted to rent it or anything.
I don't care if it goes back to Moses.
That's what I think. With your particular point of view on religion and separation of church and state, I'm sure that you don't care what the historical development was and what all these other fine distinctions were that they came up with in the Supreme Court and all the other courts in between. Whatever it is, whether it's religion or not, you're not interested. They shouldn't be tax exempt, right?
I think they should not be. It's getting worse and worse and worse.
So I don't think you need to read the Supreme Court opinion. Whatever it is, you're against it.
Absolutely. And I think that this means now that this is another, they talk about the nose of the camel. Hell, the body's in there already. Now, this is probably the last thing. Do camels have tails? That's in now. Are there any, what exactly do you do? I'm going to switch over to Joyce for a minute. And what do you do, Joyce? Take complaints all day long or from people who are?
Well, it's a little bit of everything I'm finding. I do take a lot of complaints either over the phone or on the answering machine. Those that cannot be dealt with under ACLU guise, if it's a social issue, welfare. I've had a lot of questions on welfare come in. That's not something we can get into as a rule, but I usually can kind of circle around it and get it done anyway. I've done that in 2 or 3 instances, and it's worked out for the best, and I'm finding I'm learning a lot in this office.
How long have you been here?
A little over a year.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, of course, for a long time, I didn't have a telephone that I didn't have a number that I could get through to a human being, but I have surmounted that now, and I can find you. Dan, you've been on before, and I did ask you, and I've completely forgotten. How long have you been volunteering down there?
A year and a half.
Year and a half. Oh, good. Well, I don't know. Let's get back to what kind of things do you mostly take an interest in and really do something active? I think you're quite heavy on this curfew thing that they're doing here.
Yes, that's a First Amendment issue, and I think that the ACLU's primary thrust has always been with First Amendment issues.
Well, that's nice.
But of course, it covers all the amendments. But
yes, well, the first, I'm in there too. Separation of church and
sure.
state.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, sure.
top one. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Congress will make no law.
I don't suppose it's
respecting-
an accident that it was put as the First Amendment.
Well, with all the background of this country and all the problems they had with religion, for crying out loud, and it stands to reason that if you let religion in like that, the dominant one is going to rise and squelch all the others. It's bound to happen. And I just, well, anyway, go on about the thing. This is my kind of thing. I get very, very hyper on this. So tell me about what you're doing for the kids.
Well, on
The after-school curfew thing or something like that, the daytime.
All right. Well, you know,
between-
as you may know, Dallas enacted an ordinance forbidding children under age 17 to be out at certain hours of night.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they were trying to prohibit actions that are protected by the First Amendment, the ordinance would be illegal. So they drew into their ordinance every possible exception that they could think of, saying, well, if the children, if they're going to a political rally, if they're going to some kind of church activity, if they're working and are scheduled to work at that time, they can do it. And many other exceptions. All those exceptions that were actually included in other court cases where there had been ordinances, and the court declared those ordinances too broad because they prohibited activities that were protected. So there have been previous cases where they said, well, your ordinance is invalid because it does this or that, the other. So Dallas made sure that they got all of those and made a laundry list of all the exceptions.
Yes.
So
But
then, what's that?
how are you going to prove exceptions? Were they going to carry a green card? Now we'll have fake green cards and stuff like that?
You mean, in other words, like you have a hall pass or something to be out at that hour? Right.
I have a job. I mean, what's the deal here?
Well, that's one of our objections to it, of course. We're not really looking for a perfect ordinance. You know, we don't care what the ordinance is. We're against it. You know.
Yeah.
In other words, just
like
forget it.
Separation.
Huh?
Like knee and separation.
Right, yeah. Whatever the ordinance is, they want to prohibit teenagers from being out at night. We're against it. And now, of course, the hope that we can find 5 members of the Supreme Court who would take that attitude, maybe that's hoping for a miracle. That gets into religion, though, so never mind
Well,
that.
that's
But,
all right, because that's what it's going to take for them to understand church-state separation. I know. I don't think that's high on their priority. So,
So we attack the ordinances in what way we can, where we think that there be agreement by a court, and so it has come down to nitpicking on the particular protected activities that the ordinances seek to, or either intentionally or accidentally prohibit. So we can attack them on those grounds. But of course, our real thrust is that, no, this is, I mean, where the children are out at night is something that the children and their parents should work out. And of course, if they're out doing some other activity that's illegal, well, you get them for that.
yeah,
But I think
stealing a car.
what the people are wanting to do is to have the city take responsibility for raising their children. So, for instance, there may be teenagers that are out on Southwest Military Drive, on Friday and Saturday night, having a good time, just cruising back and forth, and of course, and their parents don't have the gumption to do something about it. So they want the city to take care of it by having the police come along and say, there's a city ordinance, all of you people scram, right? That's the way,
Yeah.
that's what they want. I think that's why the majority are in favor. Of course, this ordinance isn't something that's going to prevent drive-by shootings by teenagers or
It's not
teenage
going to do
muggings.
anything.
It's not going to do any of those things, of course.
I
no.
know. So aggravating.
So this ordinance is really, although it's not particularly with the, they didn't have in mind the law-abiding, good-hearted teenager. That's the one that's going to affect most, because it's a teenager who's not into any other kind of crime, who's going to give a second thought to a city ordinance, a mere city ordinance, doesn't really mean a whole lot. I mean, class C misdemeanor on the third time you get caught. So I mean, but this is really the conscientious teenager only is the one who's going to be affected by it, I think, and who's going to be inhibited in his exercise of free speech and just freedom of activity. We don't think it should just be free speech, just to be free. You know, just it's a
right.
You know, I mean, you know, you remember on the playground you're saying it's a free country. You know,
listen,
well, is it?
Try to prove it. Try to prove it. That's the thing. That freedom. That is something you have to struggle for every day. It is not given to you on a silver salver.
Yeah.
It just simply isn't. So, well, have you guys been doing any work with this thing? What have been the parts that you played in this?
In the curfew?
Yeah,
Well,
because we had it here. It's not just Dallas. We had it here, don't we?
We have it here. We copied the Dallas ordinance, and Mayor Wolf lies to the public all the time, saying about how ours is so different. You know, I mean, you'd have to find maybe 10-word difference somewhere or other. It doesn't really amount to anything.
It's got San Antonio's name on it, not Dallas.
Well, yes, they are spelled slightly differently,
Just
aren't
a little.
they? Yeah, and as I recall, one's a little further south, and yeah, that's what. Gotcha. Well, I was, now there's another thing. Texas, it seems to be a hotbed for things right now that are very disturbing. And don't think I hate religion. I don't. Those people are perfectly welcome to have their churches tax exempt and their pews tax exempt and stay there where they belong to do their praying, but don't invade the public area. This
I
is when
thought
I
you
go
didn't go
crazy.
for that either.
I don't care what they do. No, I don't care what goes on.
No, I mean
in
as
people.
far as the tax exemption on the church itself.
Well, the church itself, I can tolerate that, but the church itself has become too big. It's not just the church anymore.
Well, see, now,
it's the playground, it's the parking lot, and they've got businesses going. There's a Catholic thing up in Wisconsin. It pounds out those little things they take for communion or the Eucharist. Well, that's a business, but they don't pay tax.
Oh, yeah.
See, it serves the church. I mean, there's always some reason.
Church products.
Yeah, sure.
And there's bookstores and TV stations and
all of that. I mean, it's massive. And I cannot tell you, and there was this woman up in Denton, Texas, and she was called for jury duty, and she went and they gave her this questionnaire to fill out, and it was full of a lot of personal questions, two of them being questions about her religion and questions about her income. And she refused to answer them, and this dippy judge threw her in jail. Well, I think she got sprung right away, didn't she, or did she? Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah. But nevertheless, this is terrible.
That's a question I haven't really seen answered. As an attorney handling a trial, if a juror tells me that he or she doesn't want to answer a question, I let it be if it's concerning their personal life.
Yeah.
I only depend on their goodwill if they want to just help us along and let us know them, open up a little so that we can see what kind of a juror they are and make our strikes accordingly if they're cooperative. If they're uncooperative juror, well, we have preemptive strikes, where you don't have to give a reason. You just cut them off, and you only have so many of those. You don't want to have to use them up. But when you see you've got somebody who doesn't want to talk to you, you don't want them anyway. So,
all right. Well, here's the way I feel about this woman. Could well be a freethinker like me, and she doesn't want to be singled out for that scorn that freethinkers get, because they don't believe in sticking their hand on the Bible, and that's going to make them tell the truth.
I agree with you. That seems like it should be the right of a juror. And now she was a juror in a capital case, and that's where you really get grilled. People. It's only one juror at a time, and you're interviewed extensively, and because this is a matter of life and death for somebody.
Oh yeah.
So they really want to know who their judge is going to be that's going to send them to the needle.
Yeah, right.
Possibly. So it's that serious. So, in an ordinarily case, I don't think this would have ever come up. But since it was a capital case, the attorney probably didn't want to have to exercise his strike. He wanted to see more into her hand, as to what kind of a person she was, to see whether she was really worth a strike or not. Because she's an independent thinker, obviously. Yeah. And so the attorneys may have wanted to keep her on. Even the defense attorneys figured, well, she's the type of person that, is going to demand proof and is going to hold her own verdict and isn't going to just go along. So she might have been a very good juror.
Right.
And,
I want to know more about her. I'm dying to find out. Anybody know anybody up in Denton where we could ask and find out about this woman? No. Darn. Well, that was certainly a very interesting one. Well, yes, getting back to those churches, I did. We had a little protest the other day about tax the churches because they've just gotten too big for their britches. And I'm tired of them dabbling in politics. Dabbling. They're running the country. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the Pope. I was sick when Bill Clinton flew out to Denver and all but genuflected before that man and stood there with egg on his face while the Pope talks about abortion and birth control and how awful these things are. To me, it was so demeaning.
Well, you know, one way they get around is they say that the Pope is a head of state because of the Vatican is supposedly a state.
Well, that just happened under Reagan.
Yeah.
We didn't used to have a diplomatic relationship.
Well, you know, locally, someone sued the Pope.
I know.
And he
wish.
he was thrown out as exempt as a head of state.
Yes, I know. Now that's bad news, but Reagan did that, and I never did understand that. He wasn't Catholic. The funny thing is, you go back to Kennedy. Kennedy was very church-state separation because he knew people were scared to death. That was the first Catholic president we had, and he was a good old boy. He was great on the church-state separation, and I have some wonderful quotes from him. But now look what's happened as we've got into the Jimmy Carters and the Ronald Reagan. He never went to church, but he certainly did court the far right, didn't he? Wow. He was talking to them all the time and all this prayer breakfast thing. And another thing, the National Day of Prayer. Did either of you see that on television? Did you get some of that?
I read some of your brochures.
Oh,
talked about the National Day of Prayer.
That was unbelievable. They had Mother Teresa who got up there and dominated the whole thing, telling all about all the evils of birth control and abortion. And here's the president, the first lady, Al Gore, and Tipper, and scads of Congress, and lots of people from around the world. And they're not all Catholic, okay? We got Muslims in there. We got all kinds of people. I can't remember how many countries. It was a bunch. In fact, I called up my brother and asked if we had that many countries in the world because there were so many. And there again, we pay them to go to Washington to do things, don't we? We don't pay them to go there and pray. They're supposed to pray on Sunday in their own church, right? Don't you think? Mm-hmm. Don't let me intimidate you. Do say something. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, as far as the National Prayer Day, you know, I grew up in a Catholic church, and for the first few years, I was used to the Catholic Church telling me, yep, this is the movie you can see. They went every Friday and Saturday and told you on Sunday, you can see this one, but don't look at that one, you know.
Yeah, and guess what you did?
We only had one theater. I mean, they're going to tell me what I can't see in the one theater we've got.
Oh, wow.
And I walked away after that, and I will not tolerate a church coming down and saying, this is the way it's going to be. Well, I live with that. I don't want to do it again.
Well, I know. And why would they think that they know so much that they can tell other people? It's control, control, control. It's the name of the whole game of life, isn't it? Control.
Well, who declared it National Prayer Day? I didn't realize it was...
you didn't know we had one. Well,
no,
it's been going on for 40...
that story
yeah,
in the news,
well,
I
you
guess.
weren't born then. It was about 42 years ago, I think. Didn't it say that it started long ago?
Yeah. Oh.
Because they do a national prayer breakfast on the base that I live on. They do a national prayer breakfast on National Prayer Day out on the bases.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so this is declared by what, Congress or something?
Well,
or
I guess so. And the only thing I can figure is somehow or other the war and the commie scare we had afterwards, and I kind of think that's when the whole thing started. Let's get this country united now. We are under God. And, you know, in the 50s was when all that, how many years ago? It was 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Yeah, you see, this could have happened somewhere in the 50s, right? In the McCarthy. That's when In God We Trust went on the money. That's when the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh. So you see what I mean by people say, well, don't get so upset. These are just little things. They're not little things, because little things build and build, and they make big things. And if you get big things done, then you've got a whole generation, out here thinking that In God We Trust has always been on the money, and that Under God has always been in the pledge. I have to tell you this funny story, because one day a woman called in to Carl Wigglesworth, and she said, oh, I was watching a movie, she said, on television, and she said, you know what? They didn't say, they were saying the pledge and they didn't say under God. Well, obviously, she was watching some old movie, right? And Carl said, what? They didn't? Like, this is big news. I mean, how did this happen? Some movie guy cut it out or something like that. And I thought, oh, please. I mean, even people his age, which he must be in his, late 40s, mid 40s, something. Surely he has some knowledge of something.
Of history?
Apparently not.
I guess not. Well, I can't. I just I go nuts. I just can't understand why we've let these things go on, and say it doesn't matter. It does matter. That's where we've got it. Every time you read a letter to the paper, we are a Christian country. We are founded as a Christian country. We are founded on the Ten Commandments, and we've got. The God thing on the money and the under God and the, so they all think this is the way the country started. That's not the way it started.
Yes, they don't look too deeply into some of the founders either, as to what their religions were, or at least their ostensible religions were, as opposed to what their real thoughts were, and so. Yeah, they towed the line in public, perhaps, as politicians do.
Yeah, political religion.
They were far more sophisticated.
Oh, they certainly were more sophisticated than anybody we've got today. Now, Bill Clinton's a worrisome thing. He said the other day, he was doing the media has had a lot of criticism from the far right, who are so strident that you get the impression that they are the whole, the core of the country, and they are the most important element. They are the mainstream or whatever. They're not the crazy. And so Carter had read this book by Carter. Clinton had read this book by Carter. He was a professor of law at Yale, and it's called what is it called? Something of disbelief, the culture of disbelief or something like that. Clinton's crazy about that book, and he said on television, as he was being, anyway, the media has been criticized for not giving presentations of religion in a nice way. They're derogatory about it, blah, 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 and they don't say anything nice. So NBC the other night, ABC did you know how they do at the end? They have a little longer thing of news, like maybe 3, 4, or 5 minutes, something where they do a little, have you ever seen it? Anyway, they do it on different subjects. So it was the spirituality of President Clinton. Well, I taped it. I taped episode 1, and I've taped episode 2. And he has been saying for a long time now, over and over again, and I've seen it in print, and I thought, well, maybe the reporter didn't get it done right. He said that although we have freedom of religion in this country, we do not have freedom from religion. Now, if you can explain to me how you can have religious freedom without the freedom to dissent, I would like you to do so.
Well, there's a lot of referring back to history when they argue over the separation clause. For instance, they're saying, how there's God mentioned in the Declaration and in the Constitution. Well, not in the Constitution, but at least in the Declaration, right? Mm-hmm. And then the language of the founders themselves often references, and there's prayers in Congress, they have to have their own chaplain, and of course, and the military thing, all these things are cited as valid connections or with religion, and saying that I don't know, I'm not quite sure how they justify it, but I don't think that's the kind of argument that is valid, just to say that that serves as precedent any more than to say acts of slavery.
Good. I was just going to say that. Yeah. Just because it's a tradition, this
right.
is good.
So when we had the Constitution founded, it wasn't a perfect document. It provided for, discrimination and slavery was built in,
and women were ignored.
It took to the time of the Civil War to straighten that out, and that's why there's a recent book written. I forget his name, but it's on the Gettysburg Address, about how Abraham Lincoln rededicated the whole Constitution in that address, putting it clearly where we stood as far as a nation of freedom, where we're not a nation of, in other words, he set down the political philosophy of the United States, reiterated it, revised it, perfected it, let's say, in that Gettysburg Address, and those words are just written in stone for us. So clear, a rededication of the nation to the idea of liberty for all.
Yeah.
And I think you could do something similar in regard to religion. In other words, it wasn't a perfect situation from the beginning as far as the separation of church and state. We continued to have state religions after during the early days of this country. I mean, it took a while. In other words, we said, the Constitution said the federal government could not set up a religion, but it took a while before we got around to saying, well, the individual states can't set one up either. And so that took a while before they abolished the state religions, the individual states, and whatever it may have been. And so that is a developing thing, to purify it, to get down to the First Amendment where it's strictly interpreted, saying, no, not only may Congress not make a law, neither can the state or your city council or anybody else in government set up a religion.
Well, I was kind of horrified. The Texas Constitution, have you all read the Texas Constitution? I'm sure it's about that thick. It costs $10.57 if you want to order one. It starts off saying, Almighty God, we call on you as we write this Constitution for the state of Texas, something like that. That's the way it starts off. Okay, they're calling on Almighty God. Now, the U.S. Constitution does not do that. And then they go on, and there are a couple of good things in there. It says, no state money should be spent on religion. Zap, period, none. But it says in there a thing that troubles me very much, and that is, it said, nobody can be discriminated against for holding public office because of his religion. And you think, oh, isn't that great? And then it says, as long as he or professes a belief in a supreme being. Well, that certainly knocked that into a cockpat, didn't it?
Yes, I was astounded to find that out not too long ago when I was asked to talk on this subject, and I was looking, well, what about our Texas Constitution? Does it go further maybe than the federal to make the clarifying things and clearly prohibiting this? And I looked the religion bit is stretched over a few of the amendments, right? The Bill of Rights in Texas. And yes, and I thought, well, surely this has been abolished since then. Let's look in the pocket part, the updates, to see that was knocked out. No, it's not there. It's still there.
We need to go after it. We need to go after it, don't we? Now, Joyce, now Dan, get on Mike's case here, and let's go after the Constitution. That's got to be changed. That's dreadful. So long as he believes in a supreme being. Now that's,
well, they know enough not to enforce it, so there'll never be a case. Well, no one's going to ever require of someone ready to take public office, do you believe or not? They know better than to try. So I don't see how we can make a court case out of it.
Well, but I'm going to try something. I am. I'm going to try something and see what happens, because there was a Maryland case of a guy who went to be a what do you call him, notary public, and he found he had to take the oath. I believe in God, put his hand on the Bible and all that stuff. And he said, no way. No, this was Maryland.
Oh, Maryland.
Yeah, so it got settled. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, which means, I would think, if that's the ruling, then it should apply here in Texas, because certainly the U.S. Constitution is above these petty state bigotry things. So, but I'm going to see what happens, because maybe they don't do it here, and that would be nice, but I think it'd be nice not to have it in the Constitution. That's not very 20th century, and we're almost 21st. We're never going to grow up. Y'all haven't said anything, but I talk too much. This is really close. I knew this was going to happen, because I can't keep my mouth shut when we get to the separation of church and state. Well, and guess what? It's a wrap for now, and two of my guests didn't even get to speak. I'm sorry about that. We'll have to get them back and let them have a turn. Please tune in again next week. Bye for now.